Try to record this. Okay, welcome everybody to the Contemporary Issues Sunday School class. Nice to see everybody. We've got 34 signed on so far.
Thank you.
And we will keep adding folks. We are so happy to have Harvey Martz today and Judy with us to talk about 10 principles that can unify America. So we'll get into those and have a good discussion. A lot of talk and discussion today, not just presentation, but a lot of good sharing of thoughts. I'm recording this with Harvey's permission, and for playback later, folks like to tune in and share it with friends. So we are recording this. Before I introduce Harvey, how about any announcements that we have? Just one that I've been looking at is the church openings for in-person services. And I know some churches have already announced they are going to wait till January 1st to open. Andy Stanley Church, I think, is a large one that has announced that. And I know St. Andrew's looking, all churches are looking at when to reopen. Anybody have any further news on that you've heard? We'll be looking at that.
Are there any conference guidelines for opening the church, or is it up to each individual church?
I don't know that, Jim. That's a good question. I think in a couple weeks, I think we'll do another review on the whole issue of what is going on new with the COVID situation and masks and churches, and just have a good discussion so we can share our thoughts on that, since things keep changing. So we will wade into that soon. Also, I'm going to invite our new pastors to be our guest on here in the coming weeks too. Jerry Butler, our pastor of discipleship, so we can get to know Jerry better and talk about classes he's going to teach this fall. And also Reverend Lauren Boyd, our new pastor of small groups. We'll see what she has in mind for small groups. So that's coming up. Also, Ron Puning is going to present about Joe Biden. He's going to tell us a little about Joe and his background and his positions. And then I may do a class on Trump, and same thing as we get into the August political convention. So we're going to be daring and share a little bit in that way. But before I introduce Harvey, let me give my usual request to mute yourself. If you're not already muted, go down to the lower left corner of your screen and press mute so your microphone is muted and we don't hear background noise. If anybody forgets, I will mute them myself. And when you want to speak, just unmute yourself and talk loud, and then remute yourself afterwards so we can have a good, clear channel here. Also, I always like to say, please do speak loud, because some of us are hard of hearing, and don't dominate the conversation coming in super frequently. Give other folks a chance to come in. And also, just be kind. This is not the place to try and convince us of your position on something or be mean to the speaker or other folks on the call. So just remember to be nice. Okay, Harvey. Harvey Martz is our former senior pastor at St. Andrew, was here at least 18 years. I know of. Harvey will tell us a little more, and he retired in 2012. He grew St. Andrew a lot and brought it to its new location, current location on the hill, which everybody worked very hard and was very appreciative of. He and his wife, Judy, had a son with Down syndrome named Todd, who they lost a few years ago. So they have known a lot of the challenges of life and have shared that with us. So Harvey, with that, I want to turn it over to you. And we will look forward to sharing. You tell us too how you want to proceed with presentation and questions. Okay, Harvey.
Thank you, Steve. We're honored to be part of the class this morning. And as I mentioned to you, I so admire what this class has been doing over the past years and admire your leadership.
Thank you.
We are privileged to still be able to worship at St. Andrew. And of course, in the past 3 months, that's meant watching the live stream. And we did that this morning. And I'm just aware, Steve affirmed this in the chat room, aware of how lucky we are to have Mark Feldmeyer as our lead pastor for the past 6 years. And look at the development and the growth that Mark has led us through. In fact, I know a few other United Methodist churches that had, as St. Andrew did last year, a 12% increase in worship attendance. That is just an astounding statistic in American Methodism, and particularly with as courageous and bold stances as our church has taken and as Mark has taken in his sermons for the past 6 years, especially the last series of the politics of compassion. I'm coming into the discussion this morning after a lot of study over the years between faith and American life. And I can tell you at the end some of the reading that I've been doing. And I can show you also, I've got a bookshelf with a whole top shelf devoted to the American character and ethical and political issues. I have some predispositions coming into the discussion today. One is, I introduced earlier my sister Evangeline, who lives in Texas and is on the video with us this morning. She and I are first generation Americans from an immigrant father who came to our country from, I'm going to use a quote, and I hope you're not offended, came from a shithole country of Greece in 1921. Greece had been devastated after World War I, and I am looking on the wall right behind my laptop here at the list of the ship manifest that he came over in April of 1921 from the island of Corfu. So I have a predisposition that is somewhat favorable toward immigrants in our country. Judy and I saw the Hamilton drama on the Disney Plus channel a couple of weeks ago, saw it again, and do you know what the biggest applause line is in the Hamilton musical? Anybody remember? Hamilton, of course, is an immigrant, and Hamilton and Lafayette sing together, "Immigrants, we get it done." So that's actually the feeling of most people in our country, that there is a real openness and desire toward welcoming and including people from other countries. I have a predisposition, and Steve referred to this earlier, toward a healthy safety net in America. We have two core values in our character. E.J. Dionne says in the book on my top shelf, Our Divided Political Hearts, he says, we have a predisposition toward individualism, doing the best one can with everything one can and being self-sufficient, but we also have a predisposition toward caring for those who are not able to care for themselves. And that has been present ever since veterans of the Civil War were cared for by national policies. It is evidenced, of course, in the Social Security Act under FDR, in Medicare, Medicaid, and now the Affordable Care Act in caring for those who are in need. In fact, I've got a Lincoln quote somewhere here. He says government is organized to do for us what we are not able to do just for ourselves and on our own. So I have that predisposition, and then I do my best to come to any discussion of national ethics, social ethics, with a bias as a Christian theologian and minister, and some scriptures that are important to me. And we're going to ask each of us to be able to name what texts and what constitutional principles go into our feelings and decision about each of these 10 items we're going to talk about. But I am influenced, I know we all are, by such biblical passages and concepts as Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of us? And it was in the solo that was sung in worship this morning. What does the Lord require of us? But to practice justice. Justice is a loaded word in the Bible. It means equitable and fair treatment for every person. No one gets disrespected or left out. Do justice, practice kindness, and walk humbly with God. So that's an important memory verse for me. Matthew 25, whenever you did it to one of the least of these, the most vulnerable persons, you did it for me. The verse from Jesus, be compassionate, just as God is compassionate toward you. And the line in our constitutional preamble about caring for the common good, caring for the general welfare in our country, as the phrase appears in the preamble, and not just for what's good for me, caring and acting on what's good for all of us together. So those are some predispositions, and I know many of you share those, or you wouldn't be part of a Christian congregation. What we're looking at today, I found it, I think, on a Facebook post about 10 years ago. Somebody had proposed that there are some core values that probably, and we're going to test that out, probably most of us agree on in American life, in our time and place in the year 2020. And I think we will find that our biblical spiritual formation informs our feelings about this. But we're really testing out together, and you should have been sent by Steve. I hope you've got it in front of you or close by. I know Steve's going to have it on the screen shortly. 10 principles that might unify most of us in America. So we're going to test that out. I think, Steve, you might put those on the screen now.
Okay. Okay, can you see them now, Harvey?
No.
Can't see them yet?
No.
Okay, I'm having a little trouble. Let's carry on anyway, and I'll try.
That's all right. That's all right. I'll just read them. I'll read them through, so you don't have to make efforts about it. Oh, you've got close by. I'm going to read them through 1 through 10, and then we're going to talk about each of them one at a time. And what I've asked you to do in one of the other documents that Steve has sent to you, I'd like us to respond about, I think now it's on.
Okay.
What we think about this particular line as an appropriate value or goal for our country. And then what are the biblical or constitutional principles that have informed your opinion? If we've not reached this goal yet, then what is preventing us from doing so? What is the opposite of this value or this goal? And what needs to be done if we agree this is a proper goal or value? What needs to happen for us to reach this in our country. And at the end of that discussion, I think we're going to be able to come up with maybe one or two or three other common values or goals that we would add to this list. I don't think this is a complete list. I'm going to read through really, really quickly. If you get sick, you should get the care you need, and your family should not have to go bankrupt paying for it. Number 2, we can and should do much more to slow down climate change. Number 3, if you're willing to work hard, you should be able to find a job that pays a decent wage. Number 4, the burden of taxes should fall primarily on those best able to bear it. Warren Buffett says it's not fair in America that his administrative assistant pays a higher tax rate than he does. 5, if you want to develop your talents through education, money should not stand in your way. Number 6, America should be a positive example to the rest of the world. When international cooperation is necessary to solve global problems, our country should lead. Number 7, every American should be encouraged to vote, and all votes should be counted equally. Number 8, all Americans should be equal before the law, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, income, religion, or any other characteristics that aren't relevant to the purposes of the law. All citizens should be treated with equal respect by law enforcement. Number 9, as much as possible, politics should be insulated from the corrupting influence of concentrated wealth. Number 10, the basic constitutional covenant is still necessary and should be respected. Majority rule that respects minority rights, 3 branches of government that check and balance each other, and an appropriate balance between the public good or the common good and individual freedom. So I hope you got those. I'm just going to look at each one by one, and I hope we'll have some open discussion about whether we think this is an appropriate goal and what it is in our political understanding and our biblical understanding that leads us to saying yes or no in regard. And if we've not reached that goal, what would it take to get there? What are the factors preventing us? What's the opposite of this goal? And what would need to happen if we want to reach that goal and achieve it? So, if you get sick, you should get the care you need, and your family shouldn't have to go bankrupt paying for it. What do you think?
Well, I can speak to that one. I have a master's degree in education, and right now I work for a company that teaches after school tennis and golf, and I work at like Cherokee Hill Trail Elementary in Parker and Summit View Elementary in Highlands Ranch, and I buy my health insurance through Kaiser Permanente, and my payments have gone up now to $309 a month.
Wow.
That's what I pay, $309 a month for a basic health care plan with a $5,000 deductible. I mean, it's just through the roof.
So Kim, you would say that you agree with that goal or that value?
I think it's a good goal, but it disappoints me that the government hasn't been able to come up with healthcare solutions that are affordable. They're just not affordable. They're just unbelievably expensive. And I haven't seen any group buying plans or interstate bidding or anything to reduce the costs. I just haven't seen. I agree with the goal, but I think it's a major failure right now because the costs are just through the roof.
You're disappointed and unhappy that we're not there yet.
Well, there are so many.
And then I also buy my own dental insurance. I mean, I think last year I paid maybe $1,000 to my dentist. I mean, that's just unbelievable.
How about some other opinions?
Uh, I strongly agree with that statement. And our basic problem is, my belief, is that our healthcare is based on insurance. And having been in the insurance business for 40 years, I am really opposed to insurance being a provider for our healthcare. It's not an appropriate vehicle to provide healthcare, because most of insurance is written to cover the risk of loss. And with healthcare, it's not a risk of loss. There's a certainty of loss because everybody gets sick. It should be a nationally financed plan or provided, supervised plan with a nonprofit motive. That's another thing. I think it's morally wrong to make a profit on someone's misery, someone's illness, someone's sickness, someone's death. We should have a national health plan, and that's what most of the progressive or leading countries in the world have had since World War II. And it shouldn't be a mystery how to provide it, because we could look at those plans, find out what worked, what didn't work, how is it paid for, are the people satisfied with it? We could analyze all those plans and come up with the best plan in the world, but we don't do that because so many wealth centers in the country are opposed to it. They like the plan that we have now. So it's up to us as citizens to vote for those who are in favor of a national health care plan. And I don't believe it should be, free, quote, unquote. Nothing is for free. It should be paid for. And I think it should be paid for by a specific tax and not, out of the general funds of the country.
So you agree with the goal, and you have some ideas about how to get there.
Yes, sir.
How about some other opinions?
Hi, Harvey. I had an opinion on it related to Canada. I wonder what your thoughts, what the other thoughts. I agree with that. And I have some coworkers that live in Canada. I work for Thomson Reuters. And it's interesting because I didn't realize this, but of course, Canada has a decentralized, universal, publicly funded health system, right? But, and evidently the 13 provinces, territories are probably primarily administering it, right? But I didn't realize, wow, the cost. He talked about the taxes in order to cover that. He pays $2,000 to $4,000 a year for his taxes in order to cover, so everybody has that health care coverage. And I agree with it, but I don't know if we'll ever get to if we do provide it. I think it's a catch-22. It's my opinion that I don't think you'll ever get a cost-effective, low-cost healthcare coverage for everyone. I think there's going to be a cost that we all would have to absorb through taxes or something, is my personal opinion, in order to get there for that statement that we all have to absorb that.
So Bob, you agree with the goal, but you have questions about how to do it.
Yeah, how to do it. Yeah, how it could be done cost effectively. I totally agree with it, though.
Other,
Harvey,
yeah.
Harvey, I agree with the goal too. And isn't it correct that the early church modeled this with the communal structure that they had, and pooling the money and taking care of each other and the women and orphans, widows and orphans? And so they set that model for us. It's just hard for us to figure out the model that works today, based on the golden rule also.
Well said.
May I interject? Thank you. One of the reasons for the resistance, particularly to Medicare for all, is the fact, Harvey, that a part of the predispositions, I certainly appreciate the predisposition that you presented for discussion and reflection, is that we inherited the Elizabethan Elizabethan poor laws. The American poor laws were founded on the Elizabethan poor laws. The dichotomy between the worthy poor and the unworthy poor. The worthy, as Steve just mentioned, orphans, widows, the aged. But when Medicare for All comes up, it rubs that dialectic between who are worthy, who are unworthy. And I think that's where you get a lot of that resistance for who is considered worthy in our society today. So I just present that again as one of the predispositions that make this first question so taxing for many people today.
Thank you. Wonder what Jesus would say about worthy or unworthy.
Good point.
Hi,
Thank you.
Harvey. I have mixed feelings about this. We have a 31-year-old daughter who has decided just to work part-time. She knew as part of that part-time work that she would be eligible for benefits. She has chosen for I don't know how many years not to have any kind of insurance because she thinks she is still healthy and nothing will happen to her. And her husband has made the life choice of not working for the last year. It is their choices, you know, and they know that we are not going to bail them out if, you know, they have a problem, because that's their life choice. And also, the other side, if you need to really be prepared for life as you age. Fortunately, Paul and I were thoughtful about that, and before we even thought about the possibility that he or I would have Alzheimer's, we got long-term care insurance, thank goodness, because people need to be aware of that in order to have care in your home, you are talking about $25 to $30 an hour, a minimum of 3 to 4 hours for care workers to come into your home. And for a care center, maybe you'd be able to find something around 6,000 something, but the average is 7,000 to 8,000 a month. And who's going to pay that if, you know, you can't pay it? Maybe you can go on Medicaid and have minimal kind of facility, and it's, you know, they're okay. I had a friend who had Alzheimer's, and that's all she could afford, and she was comfortable and well taken care of. But those are, you know, especially our daughter, she's, you know, should we be covering healthcare for somebody who has made the life choice that she and her husband have both made?
Good point. Thank you, Ann. Who else?
Hi, Harvey. This is Ed Kopis. None of you really know me. Harvey married my wife and I well over 30 years ago when he lived in Colorado Springs. But we come up here for 3 months from Texas, Austin. And my wife is very involved in healthcare. And we are very strong believers in Medicare for All. I would urge that everyone look at this one website called pnhp.org, and it's Physicians for a National Health Plan, pnhp.org. It gives a lot of good questions and answers to just some of the concerns that are coming up now. That would be a good source to find out that we can really do this. We can do a Medicare for All, and it wouldn't cost an arm and a leg. It'd be more of a diversion from other resources to the other. Now, it's a catastrophic change by all means, and it would have to be kind of pledged into. But with the for-profit system we have, and as fragmented it is, this is just doomed for failure. You're going to see premiums go up and up and up, and deductibles go up and up and up, and it's going to be a major source of bankruptcy for many, many Americans.
Thank you, Ed. I'm glad you could join the call.
This is Terry. Can I comment on this health insurance program for a second?
Please.
Medicare is a good example of what our cost is. For example, it is a volume-based system. It does not cross county lines, state lines, or any of that. For example, if you lived in Fort Morgan or Sterling, Colorado, you would probably pay twice as much for your health insurance. Just on Medicare or any type of insurance. It's all volume based. If you lived in Wyoming, you would pay 8 times the same coverage that I would pay for Medicare here in the Denver Front Range area. The problem with our healthcare, it does not cross county lines or state lines. So it's not shared equally.
So Terry, are you saying you're in favor of this as a goal?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But right now, Blue Cross Blue Shield is an example of what we're up against. Each state has their own board of directors. They're not willing to give that up for a national plan, and they're not willing to cover costs of other states. Everything stays within your state or within your county. Living in the Front Range right now, our Medicare cost, for example, is way, way cheaper. I have relatives in Nebraska that are paying more than twice as much for their same coverage as I have. Kaiser right at the moment probably has the best cost program out there.
I'm gonna move this on. I think this is excellent discussion, and we're not gonna solve this one this morning. And there's the additional complexity of, is it a good thing for requiring companies to cover pre-existing conditions or not? That's a hot debate topic and will show up even more in the next 3 or 4 months in political discussions. What about number 2? We can and should do much more to slow down climate change. Does anybody know about any biblical stories that would apply to this? In Genesis 1 and 2, God creates the day by day, all of creation, and then says to the man and the woman in the garden, you're in charge of caring for the earth. We can and should do much more.
Harvey, let me mention, for those who don't know, Harvey will be back next week. We're going to talk about these next week also, but we kind of hope to get through 5 of them today. So that's why we're kind of moving along. And if you miss commenting, it's hard to get in sometimes. Raise your hand and I will, and Harvey will try and see you and let you have a chance to get in. Harvey, I think the one on climate change, I agree with it, of course, but I think there's a lot of disagreement, obviously, in the world today on that. How do we do that? How much do you slow it down by slowing down the economy? And although it's in the Bible that we should care for the earth, obviously, and all its creatures, it's a contentious issue on how much do we slow it down and how do we do that?
Well, I think the big argument about it is whether it's natural, what's happening with the earth, or whether it's man-made. And my personal belief, it's a combination of both. There is a natural change of the climate over the centuries or eons, but I think man, and in this modern industrial world, is contributing to it and hastening the changes. The next big thing is, what can we do about it?
There are two words in the question, or in the principle, of course. We can do much more to slow down climate change. Do we agree about that?
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yes, very definitely.
Yes, yes.
And we should do much more to slow down climate change.
Yes.
I think
Okay.
I'd like to comment on this. Am I on? Yeah.
Yes, Jim, go ahead.
First of all, I think the biggest problem with this issue is that the decision needs to be made about who's going to pick up the tab for doing this. And it always seems like it bears unequally on some segments of the population other than others. In other words, the hydrocarbon industry seems like it gets most of the blame, and anybody involved in that is pretty resistant to doing anything. But everybody likes to point the finger at other people and say, you have to stop doing what you're doing so that I can breathe better, or so that I won't do it. And I think the significance of the pandemic is overwhelming at this point. We were willing to spend at least $3 trillion to address the economic issues that are facing all of us. And all of us are going to pick up the tab for that. And it seems to me pretty obvious that if we can spend $3 trillion as a country, as one country in the world, that we can make an effort to address this issue that is going to affect everybody in the world. But the United States doesn't want to pick up a disproportionate share of the problem. So we drag our heels, and other industrialized countries drag their heels because they don't want to pick up a disproportionate share. But I think unless we figure out that it is impacting everybody, that we're not going to do anything. The other thing that's very interesting to me is that with the slowdown of the economy, the air and the water in some of the most polluted areas of the world, Los Angeles and in India and places like that, where all of a sudden they could see the mountains and they can see the blue sky for the first time in years. And everybody was amazed, saying, what's different? Well, the thing that's different is that we are all of a sudden taking care of things that needed to be taken care of.
That was a dramatic change, wasn't it?
It was a huge change. It was absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah.
The thing that bothers me more than anything else is that we get arguing about the mundane aspects of this thing, about the mechanics of doing it, and instead of discussing it on a theological plane that we can all make decisions and then we can work out the details about how we're doing it, we get messed up with the details first before we get decided about the ethical imperatives of doing this. And it seems to me that we're backing into this issue, that we're backing into it as to how to do it rather than should we do it. And I don't think that there's any question that this is a theological issue that needs to be addressed by the churches and by the synagogues and by the mosques on a daily and on a consistent basis, that we need to address this with our constituents, with our members.
Thank you, Jim. That's a good analysis.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Bravo. We're going to move on to number 3. And we might think about what it was like when many of us were growing up in the 50s and 60s and what it took to maintain a household. That's the background I have in mind. If you're willing to work hard, you should be able to find a job that pays a decent wage.
Harvey?
Yes.
Yes. Some people say that the fast food restaurants should pay a decent wage. The only thing that I have against that is that it is those are the businesses that are really meant to be for a second job or a supplemental job for seniors or for after school people, and it's not meant to support a family.
Do we know what other countries do about fast food? Do you know what the McDonald's wage is in other countries?
What is it, Harvey?
It's high enough to maintain a household.
Hmm.
I think that's one of the Denmark, Sweden, can't remember. I saw an interview with a worker. But other comments. What was it
I'd like to comment
Yes.
on decent wages. I've been to Europe a number of times. Fast food industry, your food costs you 2 to 3 times more than it does here in the United States. But in Europe, for example, everybody in Europe buys their own health insurance. You have to pay somebody enough money so that they can buy their own health insurance, and then they are not eligible to cut any subsidies from the government. So the minimum wages is 2 or 3 times higher than here in the United States.
What do we think, again, based on biblical notions of justice and equity and fairness, how well has the middle class income done in the past 20 or 30 years compared with the upper 1%? Where have the big increases been? And how do we feel about that? Let's involve some other contributors.
On that point, Harvey, I think that you can look at the inequality in where the money is going. The top 1%, the CEOs are making millions while paying their workers at a substandard rate. And I think the most recent tax law has exacerbated that problem. So I think we need to take another look at the structure of the taxing to help equalize somewhat the disparities.
I'd like to comment on that. I worked for a company here in Norgren. It became run by bean counters. Those are accountants. It offshored all the work that was done here in Littleton. We lost 350 to 400 jobs here in the city of Littleton. And they moved manufacturing to Mexico and to China. Corporate America, most corporate American companies today are not owned by anybody in America. They're all foreign owned. Good example is meat processing. Our beef is owned by Brazil companies. Chicken and pork is owned by the Chinese. Our corporate America in the United States is no longer American owned.
We're getting some of the same voices. I'd like to hear from the other 30 of us.
I agree with the principle, and inarguably wealth inequality is growing. And the one thing that I would add to that is working conditions. I think we've all been struck by the ramifications of COVID and the disproportionate share that's fallen on meat processing workers. And so I think working conditions are also a critical component of that.
Well said.
Hi, Harvey. This is Cynthia Reiners.
Yes. Hi, Cynthia.
I'd like to add a different or additional lens for looking at these 10 principles, which basically comes down to we believe we have a responsibility to future generations, both here of humans in the United States, human civilization around the world, and all of the non-human elements of life on this planet. If you are not concerned about what happens to future generations, then you're likely to be willing to make sacrifices that are implied through all of these. If you're comfortable today, if you have health insurance, if you have a retirement plan, if you live in a comfortable house, and you don't believe you are responsible to the future, I believe it is much, much harder to choose sacrifices for future generations.
You're here.
You've added an additional lens, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Cynthia. Other comments? If you're willing to work hard, you should be able to find a job that pays a decent wage. When was it? I mean, I'm thinking of my own growing up, 50s and 60s. Was it possible for a one wage earner in a household to support a household and buy a house?
You bet it was.
Much more than today, wasn't it?
You know, something else that we need to remember is that the programs of the Depression, the WPA and the CCC, were absolutely revolutionary programs for the federal government to institute. But in case people are wondering, those programs left a legacy for successive generations that is still, that we are enjoying today to a huge extent. So an awful lot of great buildings and projects were created and were completed under those programs. And so people were saying, well, that's just wasted money. But I think those things paid huge dividends. And they succeeded in putting a lot of young people to work and to training them in trades that sustain them for the rest of their life. So my answer would be definitely yes.
Thank you, Jim.
I think that's a key point, training for the future. Sass's book, the senator from Nebraska, Republican, his book, Them, gets into much of this. So many of the jobs will be obsolete in 2030. So training for the future, like in Sweden, rather than putting the miners back in the mine, they're using robots. So they're teaching the workers how to become skilled with the technology of the future. So planning jobs that have a future that will not be obsolete in 2030 and 2040. Future generations, Cynthia, future generations.
I also want to say that the concept of universal basic income has relevance. A number of countries have tried it. We're testing it out in various places here in Canada, and I think it's an extension of this concept that to create basic sustainability and not subsistence, but a reasonable standard of living gives everybody a foot up so that they don't have to be worried about subsistence, but can plan for their futures. And it's certainly a concept that I think is worthy of consideration going forward for the states.
Thank you for that additional idea. What do you think of that, folks?
Well, America has such a focus on the individual pulling himself up by his bootstraps that it's hard to get a consensus that to have more social safety net.
Hi, this is Alice. I'm looking at number 3 and number 5. I think they are tied in together. We should be willing to educate and train those people that want to and who want to move up and make a better wage. I think it's key for our future, for our grandchildren, that they be trained and educated.
Thank you, Alice.
Harvey, I'd put a little extra thing on that. I wonder if you are willing to work hard, should you be able to keep your position into your 60s? I see a trend. I am fortunate, thank the Lord, that I can keep mine in my 60s. But I see, as I become older, I see that not happening, and I wonder what the thoughts are from the group on that twist.
Harvey, we've got about 10 minutes left if you want to move on to 4 and 5.
That was my next statement also, Steve. Thank you, brother. Here's a interesting one. The burden of taxes should fall primarily on those best able to bear it. I quoted Warren Buffett a while ago, and I think most of you are on. He believes that he should not pay a lower tax rate than that of his secretary or administrative assistant.
Perhaps the tax code needs a thorough rewrite to eliminate some of the benefits that the rich receive for various deductions and exemptions. And I thoroughly agree with number 4 that we need to do something to make it less burdensome on those with lower incomes.
Thank you.
This is Karen. I have 2 comments. One on the comment that the woman right before me mentioned. I think it's very difficult when we look for the tax codes to be rewritten, because who are the people that are rewriting? And those tend to be the wealthier people. I could be wrong about that, but it sure feels that way, seems that way. And so how likely are they to put a task force together representative of ethnicities, different levels of wage earners, and really try and put something together? I think that will always be a challenge for us. And the other comment I was going to make as we talk about the tax code is, and who should we pay? I get really frustrated when I don't have worked in corporate America, have worked at the C-level, and it's appalling what you see and have to look the other way when they do all the things that they do to not, in my opinion, pay the taxes that I think that they should be contributing to the, I guess it goes back to a general philosophy that I have, and that's for the greater good. And I just don't see them. It's not the greater good. It's what all can we take to make our company more successful.
I was going to say something.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah, this is Tom, and Tom Reinders, and I was just thinking that it seems to me that all of these issues really, in order to make real progress in them, it might not be individual, but it needs to be at a higher level, at a government policy level, more than individual level. We can all accept all of these. These are very excellent ideas, but it really is at the government policy level that any significant advance is going to be made in any of these issues.
Thank you, Tom.
There's some biblical help with number 4, to whom much is given, much is expected.
Good one.
I thought somebody would come up with that uncomfortable verse. Well, Steve reminds us, how about number 5? If you want to develop your talents through education in America, money should not stand in your way. As a operating principle, do you agree or disagree, and why? And what's your foundation for your opinion?
Does that mean free college, Harvey?
Well, the strategies for that are the next level. What's been the inflation rate of college education in the past 15 years? Anybody know? Way above the cost of living.
Harvey, I think we have a precedent in our sister state, New Mexico. If you have a B average in high school, you get free college education in the state-supported institution of higher ed.
Wow.
Bravo.
A lot of the medical students, because they get free tuition, are not encumbered by the residual expenses once they are in practice, which creates many difficulties for many people.
Yes.
This is Jim. Our daughter lives in Georgia, and they have a program there that I didn't even know existed, that if you have a B average in a public school in high school, that you will be, that you can go to any state-supported university or college, and your tuition will be waived as long as you maintain that B average.
Wow.
There are also many ways to do it more reasonably and not have these high expectations of going out of state to an Ivy League college or a private university, even within our own state. One of our daughters went to the University of Wyoming and the other went to a CSU. They were both in school for 2 years at the same time. It was cheaper for our daughter to go to University of Wyoming due to the Western Exchange, a WUI scholarship program, which people need to look into. Our other daughter just graduated from Oregon State University in a 2-year master's program, and she is debt-free because she really looked out for programs and she was willing to work 20+ hours in addition to taking a full load. You can do it. You just have to be proactive and really think about where you're going to college and how much debt you're going to accrue.
What would happen in our country in the next 20 years if we made higher education more affordable and accessible? What would happen?
Harvey, this is Sandy. I think I have something to say that pertains to 3 and 4 and 5.
Yes.
There's a problem. There's a systemic problem. Corporations continue to maintain that their main responsibility is to their shareholders. So they don't want to pay taxes. They want to pay the lowest wages. They sure don't want to pay for education. So I think it's a systemic problem. And I don't know what you do to change the minds.
Yeah, one more comment and then we'll wind up.
Ben Carson, in one of his first books, said that we need more doctors and we need to support them by giving them more education at no cost.
Thank you. What would apply? How would we apply the notion of we exist in our country to benefit the common good, the general welfare of our country, and not focus on individuals, corporations? What would be good for all of us? I'm going to leave us with that question because my clock says 11:29. I'll let Steve wind us up.
That's a good question, Harvey. We'll think about that one. Good discussion today. We got through number 5. That's a good accomplishment. So we'll do the next 5 next week.
Yes, and please take a look at, I put some questions in about the preamble to the Constitution. If we have time at the end, next time we'll focus on that and how well are we doing at fulfilling the goals of the preamble, and how would we describe the moral health of America right now? The moral health. Thank you, Steve. Bravo.
Thank you, Harvey. And we appreciate you looking at things from a Christian perspective too. Politics can be so divisive and separated from theology or tied too closely to theology that it gets all messed up. So we appreciate your compassionate and wise words today.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you join us
Thanks,
next
Harvey and Steve.
same
Thanks,
time,
Harvey.
same channel.
Thanks, Harvey.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Well, there's what I was trying to get. This.